Shirley here with Sirius Talisman. This is Venus, our moon day. In the ascendant is 9 degrees Leo, Sun 7 degrees Libra. Moon is squaring Sun from Capricorn, and Venus is applying to conjoin Ketu, ruling the midheaven. So, this is something where I've had a conversation actually with a lady that's having nice courses for people, whether they went through trauma or in general, about how to stop people pleasing. Now, this is such a great topic at the aftermath of the eclipse because we are, as humanity, moving away from people pleasing patterns. And as a continuation of that, I told her when I set boundaries in my life, and those were boundaries that were usual because I was not, I was being an avoidant, let's just put it that way. It's not like I was not being a people pleaser, I was just being an introvert to swipe that under the rug. I have Libra 8 house, so I swiped under the rug many things, and then I just, became introvert. But when I began to purify the house, then I would come across the many reasons why I had to purify the house. Now, I've been talking about the property I've been living in Arad, which is really such a shame because it's really such a lovely location, and that's just, I just love seeing houses and lands and properties grow and prosper, and the people in them grow and prosper, including myself. So, yeah, that's something to think about. But the continuation of that is that people that do to improve their situation or do their shadow work or take steps to better their lives, they're always going to expose everything that is preventing them from actually having a good life or good health and so on. So, one of the things that I've been dealing with, and I was going to write a post about that, and as I was writing a post, I was given a couple of examples. And one of the examples had to do with the people that, take space to make sure that the space around them is in nice energy, and the energy in themselves is nice energy. They will run into the reason that it's not. And then I realized that the rituals that were done in the property that I escaped from, that were, and I really thank Light here, because she exposed that dumbfuckery, and those were rituals to prevent a person from growing. And then as I'm saying that, I was about to talk about the property, but I'm getting an attempt to psychically attack me from my ex-bestie. And apparently he was involved with doing such rituals when we were living in cohabiting. So that is really something that I want to address because before I left, I was learning aromatherapy, and then unfortunately, my aromatherapist teacher was involved with doing rituals to limit the growth of people, and they basically, it's basically done for supposedly a part of a human sacrifice and ritual abuse, but it's done a part of archaic rituals to consolidate wealth. And people just didn't want certain people to be a part of the wealth and well-being. When I addressed, dogs being shot in Oregon, because landowners are in risk of having their land confiscated and the dogs protect the property. That's one step away from doing those rituals on the property. Actually, African people are well aware of the things that people try to bury in soil and whatnot. I've had this done. I've seen that done to a couple of properties, and actually, the way that I would do, I would dig half moon and it would transform the ritual that was done on the property. So I did it to a couple of households that I saw voluntarily. It's not, yes, it's not something I charge money for or I'm an expert in. It's just that, I was going to dig a half moon and then I see that there was a ritual done on the housing of the people living in the building. So just transform that. Just digging a half moon transforms that. It's just, but the thing is that when people want to improve upon their wealth and well-being, normally they're expected to do networking. Okay, think about it. A person is looking for a job and they need connections to find the right employment and so on. Now, this is so important to pay attention to the rituals that exist in a certain society. Because if those rituals are limiting people's growth or treason rituals or any such thing, there really is nothing that society has to offer that's going to be worth those rituals. And this is also true to wealth families that sacrifice children, and they basically practice outdated wealth rituals that make people, you know, consolidate power and wealth, but be very unhappy people or very unhealthy people. And this is how basically the elite eroded prior to the Spanish flu, because those rituals were preventing people from having access to wealth. They were preserving an archaic courtesan division. They were making things very permeable to wealth confiscation. And that's basically what I have to tell people is that you want to be paying attention to that, because when you do and you take care for yourself, for your living and so on, then something tries to bother you from that, then that could be rituals of those societies. And when I actually was doing an essential oil blend, and that essential oil was supposed to be about new beginnings, I was providing that for my what I thought was bestie at the time. Um, it becomes, the more time passes, I understand that how much I overcredited them to what degree. And it was in their Saturn return that it all came about, and then Saturn maturation. Um, so what can I say? That's just that just it is what it is. Um, because I'm going to just keep doing for me, and not keep doing for me from a selfish notion. Keep doing for me so that my heart is open, so that I'm ready for happy, safe, sane relations in my life. And one of the things that I really told that person was around, it was around growth. It was a conversation about the how to yes, not dismissing like ideas or something like that, but asking always how to make something possible that is benefit for myself and humanity. And we talked about leaving the Holocaust timeline um, that had to do with the perception of lack. And yes, I'm not going to touch on their upbringing, but a lot of people grew up, including myself, you know, in Europe, if Ashkenazi are used to that if there's an apple and the part is a little bit weird, then you cut the little bit weird part and you eat the apple. Although in hotter countries is absolutely not suggestible to do that. And maybe also in the colder countries, I mean, it's better to give that apple to the soil and grow more apples, but people that didn't have soil are not accustomed to that. So that creates, but that is also where, yeah, people don't honor sexual sovereignty and autonomy, and consequently, they live in a constant lack. Um, People don't hug themselves even. People don't grow into that, and because I grew into such society also, then um, what would happen is that the way people try to compensate for their needs is weird, and uh, I would help, it would only be when I would help people with suicide that we shared stories amongst us of what helped people. And young girl that was about to jump from the rooftop really needed to hear that she's loved and somebody cares for her. Now it's probably for most people it's probably not that it was like, traded to human trafficking elite. Although that's a lot of people's stories, but sometimes it's like, hey, the parents were taking care of the physical needs and not really of the emotional needs, and a person can feel uncared for on an emotional level. It can even be those small things. But when people are living in lack and deprivation, um, and they expect those needs to be fulfilled by people who are still going through tending to lack and deprivation. Now, for some people, for example, if I think about the person I called my bestie, they were depriving themselves of material goods to save for the future, so to speak, only to find out that real estate is a treason cult of organ harvesting and human trafficking and whatnot, which erodes real estate. I mean, think about it. Houses used to be set in stone, and what is set is in stone is being destroyed at this time. Again, because without sustaining for sexual sovereignty, even the Mayan and the Aztecs, they were doing bloodletting rituals and they were completely destroyed, so much so that all that was left was sometimes a cooking book. Now, you wonder why a cooking book? Because cooking, it was the only thing, it was the only nourishing teaching that they had left after they did all the bloodletting rituals, um, that were basically getting addicted on some substance that is being produced with high adrenaline that happens in time of stress, and that's not that's not a happy thing to consume. um, and so you think about the fact that most of the supposed wealth is carried like that. It's not really wealthy. People have smart houses that exile the owners. This was actually a true story about a billionaire house. They had a smart house and nobody, absolutely nobody, could live there. That's It's an evolution. Um, and what people call old money, or the wealth that is actually wealthy. Um, these people just, they if they open their morning lazy and connected, and and they're just they allocate the time to what matters. But what we don't have is the people that bridge between that. Slow living is the closest movement that we had that bridges between wealth that is actually wealthing, um, and the algorithm. See, most people that will open advice on financial freedom will see people that moved from here to there to increase their salary, and while that's absolutely not bad, they're not being told of the human trafficking and the double dealing that somebody may have to do, and they're being marketed to move a country without actually having a realistic appraisal, supposedly seeing that as a land of opportunities. Um, and those people that didn't, move in with their partner and had a great relationship when they were studying, like, those people are the, I don't know if they are the minority, but those are not the stories that you would hear about from the people that market the life, the glorious life elsewhere, to surround yourself with people that make so and so digits, um, not really exposing the entire reality of those things. Um, for example, it is also important to talk about, culture, although not in all countries that is a possibility. Okay, so that's something to think about. But then when people are doing for themselves, normally they would sense there's something's not something, and that usually means that something's going to be exposed. And sooner or later, it will be exposed. Like those scammy things, sooner or later are exposed, and they leave those that were building on enslaving another in such a sorry state. Um, because nothing will work in their life until they would change, that trajectory. For me, until I would move out of living with my so-called bestie. Yeah, I'm not joking. That was terrible. Um, because I considered all the good things that were there, and and even when I moved out, I was like, hey, I'm grateful for all the good things that you've done, and so on and so forth. And I set a boundary for what's not. So people that believe that they're good, that them doing good to another creates a debt in another. Um, no, it doesn't. In fact, if you're actually doing good for another, then you create mutual prosperity that doesn't drain on the energy of both. Those rituals are actually antithetical to wealth. The rituals that people do to curse people and so on, and to sacrifice, they're actually antithetical to wealth. Um, and eventually, they would lead to a person trying to sacrifice the pillar that stood between them and, sometimes being depressed from meeting a friend that was depressed, or and finding ways to get out of that depression. Um, and so when they began to do those rituals, what what they began to declare is that something prevails is not the true essence of joy of living or whatnot. Now everybody has their own time and their own journey, um, but this is just raising awareness, because a lot of people, particularly when it's clubs that people need to be invited and so on, a lot of people are not really aware that the fact that certain people supposedly have power, or supposedly hold wealth, doesn't mean that that wealth is actually wealthy, doesn't mean that they're going to be happy and healthy. And you know, and it also doesn't mean that people need to give up their vision of having a good life. Um, it's just understanding that sometimes, even our own intuition in that regard is really important, and each person would be in their own path. For example, I could clearly identify that my emotional needs are not going to be, I wasn't depending my emotional needs on the person that was my bestie then, because I was like, hey, I need to be held, I need to be taken care of, I hold myself as the little child. And I began to draw moons that are actually providing, but they were also enmeshed in treason cults, and this is why there were usually like not single people, and then I would not want to enmesh with them in like a romantic way, because it would be obvious that they would be either living with a partner that was providing for them, and then they fell in lust with someone that they were the provider for a split second, but then they were forced to betray, or that maybe they were supposed to traffic even a person, and they developed emotion, or that was supposed to be a lover boy or whatnot. Um, but or they eroticized treason, or I mean, people have their stories, but I wasn't going with that. Um, so for me, it was pretty obvious that I'm heading to happy, healthy, safe relation. And even when there were attempts to put me in trauma bonds, including completely torturing me, then I basically said, drop the petering, I am, drop the petering, I am, which necessitated a situation that I began to respond to these psychic attacks, um, so that those things are absolutely not what I want or where I'm going in my life. And whatever is not safe, sane, happy, healthy relation begins to crumble and expose crumbling systems, crumbling healthcare systems. Um, in Israel, we had a terrible news about a psychiatric nurse, boy nurse, that raped a patient and, I'm sorry, buried her alive in a real estate consolidation ritual. And people were shocked from the verdict. They say it was death by negligence. Um, and because I listened to Annika Lucas, I know more of what happened to that psychiatric nurse. Basically, probably went through that as a child, or was forced to, or was forced to watch that, and that became a trauma. And then he had to do that, um, probably either to get a higher rank to have connections in the certain cult, or to get a certification to be a nurse. I know that this is why I took a break from academia. I was not willing to participate in the human trafficking cult. And there was an attempt to get me to kind of, vouch for human traffickers, with the promise that I will go to the United States and have a degree there. And that is, of course, would be a treason cult. But for me, I was just not going with that. That's antithetical to well-being, that's antithetical to joy of living, that's antithetical to wealth as well. And indeed, we see the academia crumbling because of those fraternity practices. And fortunately, I had people warning me also about the fraternity practices um, that are basically ritual satanic abuse. And then, for many, many people, when we understand what is actually wealthy, then we're not we see things for what they are, with those weird societies that want people to do weird rituals to belong to them, and we see that the trajectory is not leading well-being, it's not leading wealth, it's not leading joy of living, healthy, safe relations, and those elites are crumbling, and they're crumbling for a reason. um, So I wanted to put it out there as a voice, because a lot of you might be seeing society crumbling and might feel hopeless. People have their wealth in risk of being confiscated and all these things. And I want to also broadcast to you um, from the other side, because not all people are participating in those rituals or in those societies. Not all people are cool with that. The many people are absolutely not cool with that, and I want that voice to be out there, because I don't want people to lose hope on either, on living a good life and having a sense of community and a sense of self, on having sexual sovereignty, on having, intimacy that is built on trust, and for that we need authenticity, and for that we need sovereignty, on having wealth that is actually wealthy. And I'll tell you something about even a silver jewelry. So one was lost, and then I bought another, and I was hearing, and then I learned that the trafficking call didn't want me to. Those that try to psychically target individuals, they didn't want me to wear that. At first, I thought they didn't want me to have wealth that is actually balancing inflation, and that is true too. But also the quality of silver in spirit is that it creates cohesion with the personality, and they wanted to fragment my personality. So one recommendation, there are usually discounts on the silver jewelries. You get them for like usually $50 or so. I don't have an affiliated link. Divert the money away from, and it's not the private equity. You see, I don't necessarily see anything wrong in having a couple of investors buy a property, improve its situation, then sell and leverage out the property. In fact, not at all. The problem is, what are the wealth rituals of the societies that do that? What rituals are involved in the property? And again, being involved in our investments from as many levels as we can. Even when I talk about, silver jewelry, if one can buy from the miners, it would be even more amazing. If one can understand what rituals are done in those societies, it can be even more amazing. If we can have, silverware that is, and this is how silver also in the Spanish times got stolen from Spain, because that would, by the Dutchies, by the way, because that would regulate inflation. But when we talk about rituals of human sacrifice and inquisition and all the things that we would see in Spain, we see that those rituals are basically really harming and making the entire society susceptible to invasion. Um, and so uh, honoring the spirit and matter is really important, but it's also important that our rituals will support well-being, rather than the rituals that sacrifice people, or treason cults, or those things that are really antithetical to wealth. All the things that are associated, Algol is associated with treason because she was raped, not believed, and then murdered for speaking up. And she's associated with psychic attacks, dead bodies upon dead bodies, alcohol addictions, but with a talisman, the prevention of those. And the prevention is done by addressing the patterns underneath and basically abolishing those patterns, standing one ground, standing one voice, um, yes, warding off from psychic attacks, which means warding off from people that try to feed people to the lower astral. And the funny thing is, the people that try to feed people to the lower astral would think that they need to sacrifice to Algol. They don't. They need to ward from those type of practices, actually. And another planetary force and deity that is associated is Sedna, and Sedna was trafficked by her father for him to get psychic power and control. And what happened with that is basically that the entire village had no food because it wouldn't accommodate for the single Sedna to have a childhood and to be single if she doesn't find a man that touches her in a providing, loving way rather than in a way that tries to take something from her. That's just, think about this ancient traditional knowledge and how the Inuit still deal with food crisis today. And yes, the Algol related countries still need to honor women today, including Israel. For example, Muammar Gaddafi, he wanted to have, not unlike Adolf Hitler, a bank that is separating from the banking system, but he was okay with rape. He wanted everyone to have a house, but the Viagra scandal that he allowed to rape people to repress rebellion was making him susceptible um, because if he would take care of sexual sovereignty as well and put that as a value, perhaps he would be um, perhaps he would be making a change. But the people need to be ready for that change, and usually when they're not, there are wars as predicted. Like the Dells just goes on as predicted, which is kind of a Gog and Magog that people predict for people. So yeah, I'm putting that out there, taking the time because I really want people to have the access to this information when they're surrounded with everything that is not something named, A good teaching about wealth that I got from a hidden wealth, stealth wealth talisman by Christopher Warnock was a leaf is best hidden in the forest. And this is where you know it was correlating with the fact that digging half moon to build forests will remineralize the area, but also those things will only be possible in society where the rituals that are done are not sacrificing children on those trees.